What is Discordianism, and what role does magic play in it? Is it a form of paganism, and what are their religious beliefs? Stay tuned if you want to find out. Hello everyone, I'm Angela and welcome back to my channel, your online resource for the academic study of magic and magic practicing religions and traditions. In this video, we will talk about Discordianism, and we will do it with our special guest, Essi Mäkelä. Essi is a PhD candidate at the University of Helsinki. She has written her master's thesis on Finnish Discordianism as a liquefying religiosity. Her research interests cover fields of paganism, discourses around religion, and the relationship between religion and humor. Essi is also currently chair of the Eris Association in Turku. In this interview, we will be covering what is Discordianism, the cosmology in Discordianism, what is the Discordian philosophy, and how Discordianism is organized as a religion. And we will also touch on whether Discordianism can be seen as a form of paganism and what role does magic play in this tradition. So check the info box because I will leave the timestamps. Help me in welcoming Essi. Hello, Essi. How are you today?
Thanks. I'm fine. I'm surviving. How are you?
I'm surviving.
Yeah, I guess that's the best you can do these days.
Yeah, that's quite true. But at least we're here to entertain you with a knowledgeable doctoral researcher who is going to talk to us about Discordianism. So you will be the one entertaining and educating us. And yeah, entertaining us. Okay, maybe I swear this is not alcohol, but
Okay. Whatever. I mean, it's your show.
Yeah, so let's start by giving an overview of Discordianism. So my first question, Essi, is what is Discordianism? Can you give us an overview of what it is, when it started?
Sure. Well, Discordianism is a movement started in the 1950s in California. Some students basically hung around at bowling alleys and drank beer and talked about philosophy. And then they came up with an idea that what would be basically one of the silliest things that human beings could worship, and they came up with a religion worshipping the goddess of chaos. And the Greeks actually had a name for this goddess, and that's Eris, and from the Roman mythology it's Discordia, and basically they then started to create these Zine papers with some a lot of collage artistic material, texts, and funny pictures, and ended up with a 100-page long book called Principia Discordia. I actually have a version of it here. This is one cover of Principia Discordia, and that was created from it. And basically the idea is to question the rigid ideologies that people are brought up with. I actually yesterday talked with one of the guys who had been who has created Discordianism, and he said that it was a joke in the beginning, but then it evolved into something deeper, and of course, because back in the 50s, everything in America was supposed to be great, like everything was good if it was American, so if you couldn't question it, and that's basically the idea where it started from. And also the war in Vietnam affected it and everything. And it's a very, I think Discordianism is very much of a child of its time because of kind of questioning the roles that you're supposed to have based on your gender, or that if you're American, you're supposed to be Christian and so forth. And that's where it started, basically.
That's interesting. So basically, it started as a way of challenging the status quo religiously and even culturally to a certain degree.
Yeah, and the people who were doing it were actually doing quite a lot of like protesting, like peaceful protesting and demonstrations against and for their causes, and against the causes that they felt that were oppressing them. For example, like making people go to Vietnam and keeping up the war, and then all like questioning all kinds of conspiracies that were circling around back then, especially when JFK was murdered. There was a lot of stuff going on about it, and that was picked up by these guys for many reasons. But yeah, it's like an activist thing as much as I guess it's an artistic and religious practice.
So does it mean that Discordianism somehow combines both, like, protesting against the religious establishment, but also the political establishment?
Sure, yeah, and it's not just protesting, but that's, I guess, where it kind of gets its fuel, that you know what is wrong and you know what you want to steer away from, and then you create your own kind of ideology or religiosity, and basically Discordianism, the idea behind Discordianism, one of them is that you're supposed to think for yourself, whatever that means, but then it's also like now I'm losing my thought, but yeah, it's also making like science and art and using that as a basis of kind of finding your own world, I guess, finding your own definitions and finding your own reality. And yeah, there I will go into the details later.
Yes. Yeah, because now I'm going to ask you about the cosmology in Discordianism, how the world is constructed, how Discordians believe the world has been made or is made.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, in the Principia Discordia, there is a story where which tells that the so-called counter push-pull of Hodge and Podge is the one that keeps everything in balance. So when that counter push-pull, as they say, is pushed to like towards Hodge and then towards Podge, then that created the 5 seasons or eras of Discordianism, and those are after the primal chaos, there is discord, then there's confusion, where Eris, the goddess, was born, and then there's bureaucracy, where Eris became established, and from hence she was called Discordia. And after bureaucracy, there comes the aftermath, which is brought by the shortage of paper that ends bureaucracy, basically. Well, I mentioned already the goddess Eris. She's taken from the Greek mythology, and she's a kind of a trickster character, especially in the Discordianism, because we don't really know too much about the historical Eris, like the Discordia goddess in the Roman mythology. But there is one story where she is especially in a big role because she created. She wasn't invited to a party at the Olympus. Zeus didn't want strife and chaos at his party, so Eris created a golden apple that said to the prettiest one on the side, and then the goddesses started fighting about that, and they finally asked a human shepherd or a guy called Paris that which one of the goddesses was the prettiest one, and then basically Aphrodite bribed him to say that Aphrodite was the prettiest one, and she promised him the most beautiful woman on earth, and that was Helen, and that started the War of Troy because she already happened to be married, and so forth. So that's where Eris is from the mythology. But then in Discordianism, she's kind of this way to recognize how chaos and disorder are part of the world and reality, and you can't really organize everything. And basically the idea is that everything is true, even false things are true. So everyone has their own reality tunnel through which they look at the world, and then even if you can't really see all the primal chaos, you probably couldn't comprehend it being a human being. You can maybe understand that people look at the world differently, and this way have more maybe empathetical view for other people's lives and thoughts.
I really like the idea of the reality tunnel as you described it. It's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I think that's from Robert Anton Wilson, who was one of the guys who then wrote a lot about Discordianism and kind of brought it to life through the Illuminatus trilogy, the sci-fi novel, but also he wrote about a lot of different kind of more philosophical writings.
And that's really interesting. And I also want to ask you, how is this movement organized? Do they have like a specific organization or establishment as other religious movements have, or do they only practice on their own? How do they practice? How are they organized?
Well, because it's a religion of recognizing disorder, of course, it's renowned for not being that organized. But there is, like in Principia Discordia, like yesterday we were talking with Bob Newport, he said that Greg Hill, who actually compiled the first versions of the book, really got deep into the kind of idea of building this hierarchy, like anti-hierarchy into Discordianism. So basically a group of Discordians would be called a cabal, and everyone is a pope, like every human being, every being is a pope, and so they should be treated well. And then if you would found a Discordian cabal, the leader of the group would be actually a bishop, so they would be in service of the group, as in opposed to kind of the congregation looking up to the minister or something like that. But that was also to question the patriarchy of the society, and their version of matriarchy in this case was kind of no leaders and no too many rules thing. So basically earlier on you were supposed to be initiated by, I think, Kerry Thornley or Gregory Hill, the two guys who are often said that they were the creators of Discordianism. But then later on, they decided that everyone can do it by themselves or can do it to each other. And and also the idea was at one point was to get like an ordination for ministry from like every other religion than Discordianism, because Discordianism wouldn't have such an ordination. But yeah, there is a way to get ordained and baptized. And at the moment, for example, in Finland, there is one group that they tried to register a religious community. Their Discordian group called the Finnish Extremely Free Erisian movement. Yeah, that's and then we have the association, Eristic Association in Turku, which I'm a chair of in. And it's a registered association also in Finland. But then I know that there is like a theatrical group in England which has been performing Discordian theater, and there is this international group called the Fellowship of the Ununited Churches of Callisti also. So there is this kind of small groups that are getting more organized around Discordianism, this organization. So I guess there is, in a way, there is hope. Like Discordians wish to do stuff together, even though, like Robert Anton Wilson said, Discordians must stick apart. But yeah, it doesn't mean that they are. Everyone is separate from everyone else. It means that you don't have to agree on everything to get together to do activism or religious stuff or art or science and so forth, to discuss important matters.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do they have a place of worship, like a church or something similar?
Well, not as such. Of course, there's been pilgrimage to the like the bowling alleys in Los Angeles or California, somewhere. Whittier, I guess, is the area. I know that at least one group has made like a sort of pilgrimage to a bowling alley. That probably was one of the places where they hung around. and but it's basically just it's not as established as, for example, a temple or a church would be. So basically, Discordians usually practice wherever and whenever they happen to get together and decide to do things.
And what do they practice when they do practice something?
Well, like in the beginning, there was, I think I mentioned quickly the Operation Magick. They started to kind of create this story around the JFK murders and writing to papers saying that Discordianism and the Illuminati is a front of CIA, and that's like they are only kind of doing things to control people's minds, and they also had this practice of send like check of the year. So you would choose someone, like for example a politician that is renowned for being very silly, let's put it that way, and then they would send them like cards from all around the country congratulating them for very silly things and that kind of stuff. But then there's, like in Finland, there is this practice of lol cabbage ritual that was created because there is a cabbage mentioned in the baptismal rite in Discordianism, and the goddess Kali in India happens to sound like the name of Kali is similar to the Finnish word that means cabbage. And yeah, it's a long story, but basically people have been doing a ritual called lol cabbage, walking around town and with a cabbage and repeating the mantra lol cabbage in Finnish. And the pilgrimage to a rubber gorilla has happened, and then people have done like a spirit animal search for Discordian spirit animals, and those have been, for example, a pink elephant or a flying pyramid, I think, that soft flying pyramid or something. Those are a few examples, but usually people, like there are a lot of Discordians that, for example, would do like chaos magic as their part of the Discordian practice, and for example, artistic practice could be called Discordian. And I keep saying that my PhD is one of my biggest magical practices that I've done so far. And it's still
why?
Well, There are,
Drink, you might need it when you discuss your PhD.
yes. Well, yeah, it's the biggest because it's already been 7 years. But it's also, I think there are a lot of interesting like synchronicities that are connected. For example, I'm doing research on the registration of religious communities, and I mean, in the beginning when I started, the plan wasn't to study a Discordian group, but then later on when I was thinking of maybe that I could start a Discordian community and try to register that and see how that would go, just to kind of test the system and also the academic system and how that would work for my PhD. Then at that same time, when I was actually collecting names for my group, I heard of another group that was actually practicing Discordianism and had just sent their registration papers in. So I think that's kind of a divine intervention in a way.
Eris really wants you to study Discordianism. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I can't run away from it. I don't want to either, but
yeah, and also you already mentioned that for Discordians, nothing is really real. So you might as well make of your reality whatever you like, which is something that we also find in Chaos Magic, which you have just mentioned.
Although I did say that everything is real for Discord, but yeah, I guess it's the same.
Yeah, like if everything is real, so there's nothing which is unreal.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the opposite of Chaos Magic, because in Chaos Magic they say nothing is real, everything is permitted. So maybe in Discordianism it's more like everything is real, so still everything is permitted.
Yeah, and I guess like if you think of Chaos Magic as, for example, like using different symbols to create a ritual, like I've heard people do like the, what's it called, like instead of, for example, invoking the 4 great angels, you would
the 4 corners, you mean?
Yes, yeah. And there are those angels in the Kabbalistic system.
Like to call upon the 4 elements, which some say are the 4 corners.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and that's then I've heard people do that for example, like instead of 4 elements, it would be for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that they invoke, and kind of see how that works and how the ritual works if you just switch the symbolism in it. And I guess, if you think everything is real, then you can, as you said, use everything. But it's also the same as if nothing is real and everything is permitted, because you can, again, use everything in your own advantage.
Yeah, I guess there is some kind of similarity between the concept of nothing is real and everything is real, because in both cases you are not excluding anything somehow. So normally you have to kind of say that there are certain things which are real and other things which are not real in order to make the first ones, stick out somehow. Whereas if everything is real, it's like just including every possible thing, even things which are made up, or literally anything.
And in Discordian, like worldview, while Eris is the primal chaos, it is also thought that she created everything that is, and then there is the everything that isn't, which is called un-Eris. So there is also this kind of idea of having, the small bunch of things that actually are reality, and then the rest that either we know, like can imagine, or can't even imagine. So it basically includes everything, and you just have different kind of glasses or frames through which you look at the reality you live in. So yeah.
And what is the philosophy of life of a Discordian? I mean, how a Discordian sees life and reality?
Yeah, often people think that then Discordianism would be like chaos worship, or like kind of putting more pressure on chaos because it's built around the goddess of chaos and strife. But basically, one of the philosophical points in Principia Discordia is that you're supposed to balance between the creative order and creative disorder, so you can get rid of the destructive order and destructive disorder. So it's kind of a good trip for human beings that Discordianism is looking for. That the world doesn't have to be as gray and boring and organized as we maybe feel.
So it is actually a philosophy that seeks harmony somehow.
Yes.
It's not chaotic at all. I mean, it acknowledges the existence of chaos, but at the same time is in search for some sort of harmony.
Yeah, it's like if you think about the like artistic process, first you have to go kind of into the primal chaos and be very creative, but you can't you have to have some kind of a filter to create a piece of art that can even in any way to communicate what you might have experienced in the creative part. But if you imagine like just following that chaotic whatever
rabbit hole.
Yes,
chaotic rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you just go too deep into the rabbit hole, it would be too much, and it wouldn't be a good trip, so to say. So, yeah.
So it's like you have to deep into the chaos to then gather some harmony and balance. Is that right?
Kind of, yeah. It's a very pretty way of saying it.
Oh, thank you. And now I'd like to ask you, is it a form of paganism? And also, is it a religion? But maybe we want to ask, I mean, which one do you want to...
Well, maybe I'll start with the paganism and then we can go on with the religion. I mean, both of the questions depend on how you define paganism or religion. But if you see, for example, paganism as being nature religion and then somehow inspired by, for example, pre-Christian traditions and including probably some kind of magical practice, you would have all of this in Discordianism, like with the seasonal changes of birth and death, and then the Greek goddess as the background for the whole thing, and then doing magic, and many Discordians actually are pagans. For example, my first Discordians I met were through the Finnish pagan network when I joined it, and I had read the book The Principia Discordia, but I didn't think I found it very curious. It kind of got me inspired, and I thought it was a super cool thing because it's not just a joke. It looks like a joke in the beginning, but then when you read it, you really see that there are some interesting philosophical points in it. So then it was super cool to actually meet people who call themselves Discordians and see that you can actually call yourself a Discordian and practice it, and it's okay. But there is a connection definitely between Discordianism and...
But do Discordians deem, I mean, you said that there are many Discordians who are also pagans. So normally Discordians would not automatically believe that they are pagans. So it's like a separate step to consider themselves affiliated to paganism.
I think it just depends on where you kind of happen to be, how you find Discordianism. Not all Discordians are pagans, but some are, because a lot of people might come up with Discordianism, for example, through doing like Zine kind of art. You might get interested in how the whole Zine culture was built in the US, for example, and you would probably find the Principia Discordia and Kerry Thornley's stuff from there, and then a lot of like hackers, internet, like coders, hackers, whatever, internet computer people can also. A lot of them are also Discordians. You might get, like, for example, code that has some Discordian words written into them, and yeah, it's spread wide and far. And I think it's just basically what kind of interest group you happen to be mostly affiliated in.
So between paganism and Discordianism, there are many liaison points, but the two, you wouldn't see the two as part of the same. I mean, Discordianism as part of the umbrella.
No, I would see it as part of the umbrella.
Oh yeah, so you would consider Discordianism as part of paganism.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that it also, I think that it has another foot outside of the umbrella too. So, but definitely, like if you read, for example, Margaret Adler's book from the 80s, the
drawing
down the moon, yes, about the pagans and goddess worshippers in the US, and Kerry Thornley has been interviewed for that book, and I think some people actually even affiliate the first uses of neo-paganism referring to the current practices that it refers to to have been used by Kerry Thornley in a writing that he did to a journal back in the days. So I think it's very much connected to the whole pagan movement, but I think also that there is the question of self-identification, and not everyone would consider themselves pagans or even religious, and there are people who see Discordianism only as like not a religion, but for like a philosophy or a way of looking at things. Or some people might even be Discordians because they think religion is stupid, and they don't consider Discordianism a real religion in that sense because it's not stupid to them.
Yeah. Speaking of that, do you think that Discordianism is a religion or a religious movement, or do you think that it's not to be deemed as a religion at all?
Well, I guess there is the very classical way of looking at how religion has been defined in the history, and the idea of like comparing different phenomena to the existing ideas of religion. So like, does it have a ritual aspect to it? Does it have a social aspect to it? Does it have mythologies? Does it have cosmologies and that kind of stuff? And that I think Discordianism has everything, because it is created to look like a religion. So it it definitely looks like a religion, and it functions as a religion to many people who practice it. But then there is the element of parody and joke to it that I don't think it excludes the definition of religion, because it's very much built into the idea that life isn't supposed to be boring and serious, but taken, not with a grain of salt, but a spoonful of sugar, maybe. In this case.
Yeah, like to take life more lightly, and so the parody can be even a tool for the religiosity to a certain degree.
Yes, and it's not a new idea either. Like, for example, the Zen Buddhists have their koans that are kind of funny looking stories about, for example, a student asking a teacher a question and then the teacher giving a very silly answer, and then either the student is enlightened or they are not. And those are very kind of funny things. And then there are a lot of humor. There is a lot of humor in many religions, but I guess it's ever since Enlightenment when all the seriosity got into the Christian theology and trying to kind of compete with science and everything like that. So it's a complicated history of trying to separate things. And then now that you have, like, we have Discordianism, but then we have the Satanic Temple and the flying spaghetti monster that are
Pastafarian.
Yes.
Pastafarianism.
Yes, that are very widely popular and very funny things, but also claim to be religions. And I mean, of course, there is the question of using religion as a term whenever it is, useful for you to do so. Like, for example, to get to wear the pasta strainer on your head, or to get to register a religious community that might give you some rights in the society. So you would want to be called a religion, but then it's the legal systems are more conservative. So their idea of religion is more historical at the moment, I guess. So it hasn't, like, for example, in the Finnish context, the Pastafarians and the Discordians also failed to register their religious communities.
I once read a paper on the failed attempt, even in this case, in Finland, to get Wicca registered as religion. I think it was by Timo Taira.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess he wrote about it, and I guess Susan Owen was in the similar context, but.
Yeah, I think that they also authored a paper on the definition of religion, I think, or yeah. But I found it interesting because the case of Wicca in Finland really resembles a similar case occurred in Italy. But in Italy, it is very different. I mean, how the state defines religion is basically shaped upon Catholicism. So you don't really have much room to, not even Islam is considered legally, of course, it is socially considered a religion, but for the government, for legal purposes. So yeah, that is maybe a conflict between how things are socially understood and how law, and whether law catches up with what people believe, and how the discourse around religion evolves for people.
Yeah, and in the Finnish case, the Wiccans, I guess they failed mostly because they were trying to describe Wicca as kind of a self-identification. So anyone who would call themselves Wicca, they wanted everyone that would call themselves Wicca, they wanted them to be able to sign the papers. So if you have a movement like Wicca that has a lot of different kinds of traditions and a lot of ways to practice it kind of makes that a huge conglomerate of different things. And then the education ministry in Finland, they consider that because you're supposed to be able to, the state is supposed to be able to offer religious education for registered community members, children. So that, if you can't have if you don't have your references and like a very kind of clear idea what the tradition is written down or already known, which is of course the thing with Christianity or Islam, if that's registered in Finland, they don't have to describe their practices as much as these small religions.
Yeah, in this case, we may argue that the legal definition of religion tends to imply that the religion must be standardized for all the people who follow the specific religion. But is it necessary for a religion to have a standardization of the belief system among all their affiliates?
Yeah, that is a question. and I mean, in Finland, you could, like, for example, register many different communities that would practice Wicca. So you could have different traditions, and many Wiccans think that it would be easier to register like a Gardnerian or an Alexandrian Wicca community. But then I think, especially with paganism, because everyone is supposed to kind of build their own paths, and even if they follow a certain kind of tradition, everyone might have a different kind of interpretation of things, and people want to remain quite free of this kind of state controlled systems. So there isn't that much will to register a religious community, especially because it's not obligatory. You can practice all kinds of religions, and you can belong to all kinds of communities without having to register it based on the law.
Yeah, that makes sense. But now let's move on to the fun stuff. Is there magic in Discordianism, and how do they practice magic? I mean, what role does magic play? Let's talk about magic in Discordianism.
Okay. Yeah, well, we did mention the chaos magic already. So I guess this again depends on how you would define magic. Like, for example, I see magic very as a very kind of wide thing. So basically everything that you do, that you use your energy to change the reality around you, could be considered magic. And of course it might have like an element that is not like a cause and causation kind of follow-up. So that's why I call my PhD, for example, a magical practice. But yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. Now I'm trying to think of something that we didn't already discuss in the.
Yeah, maybe something about the kind of magic they practice. I mean, if it is chaos magic, what kind of chaos magic do they use sigils? Do they use ceremonial magic? Do they make up their own ceremonies? Do they, work with the elements? What kind of magic do they practice?
Sure. Yeah, sure. From that point of view, the Discordian magic, of course, it looks a lot like the practitioner. So basically, if you come to Discordianism through Wicca, you might use Wiccan ritual kind of formats to then fit into kind of chaos magical context. But for example, the Finnish extremely free Erisian movement, they have this the Simon Necronomicon that they use as their basis to kind of, they try to
the one by Lovecraft.
Is it by Lovecraft? The book is called Simon Necronomicon. I don't remember the author.
But maybe it's a reinterpretation of Lovecraft, because the original Necronomicon is from Lovecraft.
Yeah, it's from the Lovecraft mythos, but this one actually has like rituals to, for example, summon spirits or open the gates to hell or other realms. So basically they use the Simon Necronomicon to they try to reenact their rituals as close as they can. So if it says that you have to have gold, they would take like a golden bracelet, for example, or something like that to represent gold, even if you wouldn't have the amount of gold that probably is necessary in that ritual. And they read the rituals or the summonings from the book and have these kind of rules. They used to live actually in a commune where there was a bell hanging in a doorway. So anytime the bell would ring, so if someone would accidentally bump into it, if a cat would brush on it, or if someone was deliberately ringing it, they would then stop everything they were doing and come to the living room and do a ritual of some kind. And I actually went to some of their rituals, and we did like a summoning of this. We summoned Cthulhu, and we also summoned. There is this like very scary creature in the Moomin stories. I don't know what the English word for it is, but this like frozen, scary blob monster that comes from the darkness.
And did they appear after the summoning? Now I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, since I guess, we all still are here, unless this is a dream, I guess Cthulhu didn't rise. But the funny thing with the monster is because like in the Moomin monster is cold, and everything she walks upon is frozen. So like the spring had been super warm until the day we did the ritual, and after that there was like this drop in temperature. So yeah, I like to think that we at least manifested her in some way. But yeah, so basically there's these rituals, and they also did a golem from a plush toy, a Kalmari plush toy. So basically a Cthulhu golem, and some people do use sigils and stuff. So there is, yeah, I guess like anything goes. All kinds of magic is okay in the Discordian realm, but these are like the examples that I've bumped into. And yeah, I mean, there are also like people who practice the Religiosity, the traditional Finnish practices, and they call themselves Discordians. And I know some Buddhists who call themselves Discordians too. So you can kind of use it as this kind of a backdrop for different traditions too, without it kind of being too yes, and now I forget words, but without them erasing each other. So it's okay to practice all kinds of things, and you can still label things Discordianism, but you could also practice it completely separately from the traditions, and that's also a thing.
And do most Discordians practice magic? I mean, is it common for Discordians to practice magic, or is it something that only, the minority of them would practice?
Well, I think the kind of separation or schism between those who see Eris as a goddess that's supposed to be worshipped, and those who see her as a symbol of getting rid of the hegemony of religion completely. It started from like Gregory Hill and Carrie Thornley already. I think Greg was the one who thought that Discordianism it was a way to get away from religions and kind of break through that barrier. But then Carrie Thornley started to actually worship Eris as a goddess of chaos, and he did a lot of crazy stuff and went quite far with his artistic or chaotic practices. So I guess that's also nowadays one way of kind of categorizing practicing different discordians. So I don't know if it's common to practice magic, but it is, or considered discordianism a religion. I think it is built into the system, but there are people who don't do it. I don't have any like statistics which one would be a bigger group or anything, but I've studied mostly the people who come from the pagan background, so they are more inclined in using magic in their practice in discordianism too.
Yeah, actually, I really like what you said, that magic is built into the system, but there are people who take advantage of it or rather utilize it, and people who choose not to. It actually makes sense, and it's a better way of framing it rather than just saying how many discordians or what percentage of discordians would practice magic, because as you said, it is part of the religious framework of this tradition, but of course people are individuals, and so each of them will decide according to their personal inclinations, belief system, and everything else.
Yeah.
So this is it for today's video. Hope you liked it. Don't forget to check the info box for all the details regarding Essi and all the references. And if you did like this video, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so that you will be always notified when I upload a new video. And as always, stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.